The morning rain painted streaks down the gallery windows as Victoria Sterling stood before her latest acquisition, a bold abstract piece that seemed to mirror the chaos in her life. The Sterling Art Gallery, nestled in the heart of downtown's Cultural District, had been her sanctuary for 3 years. Today it felt more like a beautiful prison. The bank called again, Diego Santos said softly from behind her, his voice carrying the weight of unspoken worry. Her business partner and closest friend held a stack of papers that might as well have been her death sentence. They want an answer by Friday. Victoria traced her finger along the window pane, watching the city blur through the rain. At 20, she had built something meaningful from nothing, transforming her late grandmother's small inheritance into a respected gallery that showcased emerging artists. But respect didn't pay the bills, and the economic downturn had hit the art world particularly hard. "How much time do we have?" she asked, though she already knew the answer would break her heart. 6 weeks, maybe 8 if we can negotiate. Diego's accent carried traces of his Barcelona childhood, softening the harsh reality of their situation. "Victoria, there are other options." The Harrington Group made another offer. She turned to face him, her green eyes flashing with determination. "You mean sell out to corporate vultures, who'll turn this into another soulless investment space?" "Never?" The gallery door chimed, and both of them looked up to see a figure silhouetted against the gray morning light. The man who entered moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to owning every room he walked into, all and lean, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Victoria's monthly rent. He carried himself like controlled power. Nathan Cross. Victoria recognized him immediately. His face had graced business magazines for years. The enigmatic CEO of Crosstech Industries who had revolutionized digital security systems before he turned 30. In person, he was more imposing than his photograph suggested. Dark hair, steel blue eyes, and a jawline that could cut glass. There was something predatory about his stillness as he surveyed the gallery. "Miss Sterling?" His voice was deep, cultured with an edge that suggested he wasn't used to being kept waiting. "Yes." Victoria stepped forward, her chin lifted despite the curiosity burning through her. "I'm afraid we're by appointment only. If you're interested in any of the pieces, I'm not here for art." His eyes locked with hers, and she felt an unexpected jolt of electricity. "I'm here to make you an offer." Diego shifted protectively closer to Victoria. "Sir, if this is about the building lease," Nathan's gaze flicked to Diego dismissively before returning to Victoria. "I need to hire you for an evening. One night. $50,000. The number hung in the air like a live wire. Victoria felt her heart skip, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm not sure I understand. I need a date." Nathan's mouth curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "For a charity gala next Saturday. High society, formal affair. You'll need to convince everyone there that you're completely infatuated with me." Victoria's eyebrows rose. "You want to hire me as an escort? I'll want to hire you as an actress." Nathan stepped closer, and she caught the scent of expensive cologne mixed with something darker, more masculine. "One night of pretending to be madly in love with me? $50,000? Cash." The silence stretched between them, thick with tension and unspoken questions. Victoria was acutely aware of Diego's sharp intake of breath, of the rain still streaming down the windows, of the way Nathan's presence seemed to fill the entire gallery. "Why me?" she asked finally. Nathan pulled out his phone and showed her a photo. Victoria's breath caught. It was Celeste Montrose, society darling, and daughter of real estate mogul Richard Montrose. Golden hair, perfect features, the kind of woman who looked like she'd been carved from marble by a master sculptor. "My ex-fiancé," Nathan said, his voice carefully neutral. "She'll be at the gala with her new lover, my biggest business rival." Understanding dawned on Victoria. "You want to make them jealous? I want to show them exactly what they lost." Nathan's eyes darkened. "Celeste threw me over for Blake's older money and political connections. She thought I'd come crawling back. Instead, I want her to see me with someone who makes her look like a pale imitation." Victoria studied Nathan's face, looking for cracks in his composed facade. "And you think I can do that?" "I've done my research, Miss Sterling. You grew up in high society before your family lost everything in your father's scandal. You know how to move in those circles, how to speak their language, but you also have something Celeste never did." He paused. Authenticity. Wow. The mention of her father's downfall hit like a physical blow. Victoria's family had indeed fallen from grace when she was 22, her father's investment firm crashing, in a blaze of fraud accusations and bitter lawsuits. The society friends had vanished overnight, leaving Victoria to rebuild her life from the ashes of her former privilege. "You've certainly done your homework," she said coolly. "I always research my investments." Nathan's gaze never wavered. "The question is, are you interested in saving your gallery?" Victoria felt the weight of the offer, the impossible temptation of it. $50,000 would cover her debts and give her enough breathing room to rebuild. But the cost felt higher than money. "What exactly would this performance entail?" she asked. Nathan stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of silver in his blue eyes. "You'll be my devoted girlfriend. Hang on my every word. Laugh at my jokes. Make it clear to everyone watching that you can't keep your hands off me." Heat flashed through Victoria at his words, and she hated herself for the reaction. "And you? What will you be doing while I'm performing this Oscar-worthy act? Making sure every man in that room wishes he was me." Nathan's voice dropped too. A murmur. Making sure Celeste realizes she made the biggest mistake of her life. Diego cleared his throat. "Victoria, this sounds dangerous," Nathan finished, his eyes still locked on Victoria's. "It is dangerous for them. They've had everything handed to them their entire lives. It's time they learned what it feels like to want something they can't have." Victoria found herself taking a step closer to Nathan, drawn by something she couldn't name. "And after one night, what then?" "Then you go back to your life, $50,000 richer, and I go back to mine. No strings, no complications." Nathan reached into his jacket and pulled out a contract. Everything spelled out in black and white. Victoria took the papers, her fingers brushing against Nathan's. The contact sent a shock up her arm that she tried to ignore. "I need time to think about this. You have until tonight." Nathan pulled out a business card and handed it to her. "My private number. Call me when you've decided." He moved toward the door, then paused and looked back. "For what it's worth, Miss Sterling, I think you'll find the evening more interesting than you expect." After he left, the gallery felt strangely empty. Victoria stared at the contract in her hands, her mind racing. "This is insane," Diego said. "You can't seriously be considering this." Victoria looked up at him, seeing the concern in his dark eyes. Diego had been her anchor through the worst of times, the friend who'd stood by her when everyone else had fled. But he'd never moved in the circle she'd grown up in, never experienced the particular cruelty of high society's games. $50,000, Diego. "Money isn't worth your soul," Victoria laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My soul? I'm not selling my soul. I'm playing a part for one evening. With a man who clearly has an agenda that goes beyond simple revenge." Diego moved closer, his voice gentle but insistent. "I saw the way he looked at you, Victoria. And the way you looked at him." Victoria turned away, but she couldn't escape the truth in Diego's words. Nathan Cross was dangerous, not just because of his wealth and power, but because of the way he'd made her feel in those few minutes. Alive, electric, like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, deciding whether to jump. That evening, Victoria sat in her small apartment above the gallery, staring at Nathan's business card. The contract lay spread on her coffee table, its terms surprisingly fair and protective. One night, $50,000. No physical contact beyond what was necessary for appearances. She thought about Celeste Montrose, the perfect society princess who'd probably never struggled for anything in her life. She thought about her father, broken by scandal and betrayal. She thought about the gallery, her dreams crumbling under the weight of debt and circumstance. At 11:30, she picked up her phone and dialed Nathan's number. He answered on the first ring. "Miss Sterling, I'll do it," she said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. "Excellent. I'll have a car pick you up tomorrow at 2. We'll need to get you properly outfitted for Saturday night." Nathan, she surprised herself by using his first name. "Yes, this is just business, right? One night, no complications?" There was a pause, and when Nathan spoke, his voice was softer, more dangerous. "Of course, Victoria. B, As she hung up the phone, Victoria realized she was shaking. She'd just agreed to play with fire, and deep down, she suspected she was about to get burned. But for the first time in months, she felt truly alive. Outside her window, the city lights blurred through the rain, and Victoria Sterling prepared to step back into a world she'd sworn she'd never enter again. The sleek black car that arrived to collect, Victoria was worth more than her entire art collection. As she slid into the leather interior, she caught Nathan's scent lingering in the air. That intoxicating blend of power and mystery that had haunted her dreams the night before. The driver took her to the most exclusive shopping district. In the city where personal stylists waited at Armani, Valentino, and other boutiques Victoria had only dreamed of entering. Nathan had spared no expense, and as she tried on gown after gown, she began to understand the magnitude of the world she was about to re-enter. "This one," said the lead stylist, a sharp-eyed woman named Francesca who clearly knew her business. The dress was stunning, a deep emerald silk that hugged Victoria's curves before flowing into an elegant train. The neckline was daring but tasteful, the back cut low enough to make a statement. When Victoria looked in the mirror, she barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked like she belonged in boardrooms and ballrooms, not struggling to keep a small gallery afloat. Nathan arrived just as the final alterations were being completed. He wore a perfectly tailored tuxedo that emphasized his broad shoulders and lean frame. When he saw Victoria, something flickered in his eyes that made her pulse quicken. "Perfect," he said, his voice rough around the edges. "You look absolutely perfect." The gala was held at the Grand Metropolitan Hotel, a palatial venue that dripped with old money and older secrets. As their car pulled up to the red carpet, Victoria felt her nerves flutter. Cameras flashed, capturing the city's elite as they made their grand entrances. Nathan stepped out first, then turned to offer Victoria his hand. The moment their skin touched, electricity shot up her arm. He leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. "Remember, you're madly in love with me," he whispered. "Can you handle that?" Victoria looked up at him, her green eyes sparkling with challenge. "Can you handle being loved by me?" Something dangerous flashed across Nathan's face before. He smiled, the expression transforming his harsh features into something devastatingly handsome. "We're about to find out." They walked into the ballroom together, Victoria's hand on Nathan's arm, and the room seemed to pause. Conversations died mid-sentence as heads turned to follow their entrance. Victoria had forgotten the intoxicating rush of being the center of attention, the way power felt when it flowed through a room like wine. "Nathan Cross," a voice called out. And Victoria turned to see a distinguished older man approaching with a blonde woman on his arm. Harrison Blake, she realized, recognizing him from business magazines. He was handsome in a conventional way, with silver at his temples and the easy confidence of inherited wealth, but it was the woman beside him who made Victoria's breath catch. Celeste Montrose was even more beautiful in person, with porcelain skin, golden hair swept into an elegant updo, and a figure that belonged on magazine covers. She wore a white gown that probably cost more than Victoria's rent, and diamonds that caught the light like captured stars. "Harrison," Nathan replied smoothly, his arm tightening possessively around Victoria's waist. "Celeste, how lovely to see you both." Celeste's blue eyes fixed on Victoria with laser intensity, taking in every detail of her appearance. "And you are?" "Victoria Sterling," Victoria replied, extending her hand with practiced grace. "Nathan's told me so much about you, has he?" Celeste's smile was sharp as a blade. "How interesting. I don't believe I've seen you at any of the usual events." "Victoria prefers to stay out of the spotlight," Nathan interjected, his fingers tracing a slow circle on Victoria's lower back that made her shiver. "She's far too fascinating to waste time on society gossip." The insult was subtle but unmistakable. Celeste's cheeks flushed pink, and Harrison's jaw tightened. "What do you do, Victoria?" Harrison asked, clearly trying to regain control of the conversation. "I own an art gallery," Victoria replied. "I specialize in discovering emerging talent. It's wonderful to find beauty that others have overlooked." She felt Nathan's surprised glance, but she kept her eyes on Celeste, who was clearly struggling to maintain her composure. "Quaint," Celeste managed. "I've always found art to be such a risky investment," So many artists never amount to anything. True. Victoria agreed with a smile. But when you find the real thing, the authentic passion, it's worth any risk. Wouldn't you agree, darling? She turned to Nathan as she spoke, letting her fingers trail along his lapel. The endearment rolled off her tongue like honey, and she saw his eyes darken in response. Absolutely, Nathan replied, his voice husky. I've recently discovered that the most valuable things in life are often the ones you don't expect. The tension between the four of them was thick enough to cut with a knife. Other guests were beginning to notice, subtle glances and whispered, conversations spreading through the ballroom like ripples in a pond. Well, Harrison said finally, we should let you to get back to your evening. Celeste, darling, I believe they're about to start the auction. As they walked away, Victoria heard Celeste's furious whisper. Who is she? Where did she come from? Nathan's hand slipped to the small of Victoria's back, his touch burning through the silk of her dress. Impressive, he murmured. You certainly know how to handle yourself. I had good teachers, Victoria replied, thinking of her mother's lessons in navigating society's treacherous waters. Though I have to say, your ex-fiancée is even more charming than I expected. Nathan's laugh was low and dangerous. She's not used to competition, especially not from someone who outclasses her so completely. Before Victoria could respond, the orchestra began to play, and couples moved onto the dance floor. Nathan turned to her, offering his hand with a slight bow. Shall we give them something to really talk about? Victoria placed her hand in his, and he led her onto the floor. The moment he pulled her into his arms, the rest of the world seemed to fade away. Nathan was an excellent dancer, leading her through the steps with confidence and grace. It was more than technical skill that made her breath catch. It was the way he held her, like she was precious and dangerous at the same time. You're full of surprises, Nathan said as they moved together. Art gallery owner, society survivor, mysterious beauty. What else don't I know about you? Victoria looked up at him, seeing something vulnerable beneath his controlled exterior. What makes you think there's more to know? 'Cause you're not who you pretend to be any more than I am. His hand tightened on her waist. The question is, which version is real? The music swelled around them, and Victoria found herself leaning closer to Nathan, drawn by something she couldn't name. Maybe they both are. Maybe we're all just playing different roles, depending on who's watching. And what role are you playing? Now, Nathan's voice was barely above a whisper. Victoria's heart pounded as she met his gaze. I'm not sure anymore. The song ended, but they remained frozen in each other's arms for a heartbeat longer than necessary. The spell was broken by polite applause and the rustle of fabric as other couples left the floor. Throughout the evening, Victoria noticed how heads turned when they passed, how conversations stopped and started again in their wake. Nathan introduced her to politicians, business leaders, and society matrons, and she played her part perfectly. But somewhere between the champagne toasts and intimate conversations, the line between performance and reality began to blur. When Nathan's hand lingered on her shoulder, when he whispered in her ear and made her laugh. When he looked at her like she was the only woman in the room, Victoria found herself forgetting that it was all an act. The evening reached its climax during the charity auction. Nathan bid aggressively on a weekend at a private resort, driving the price higher and higher until Harrison Blake finally backed down. When the gavel fell, Nathan turned to Victoria with a triumphant smile. Consider it an early anniversary gift, he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, then leaned down to kiss her cheek. The gesture was meant to look casual, but Victoria felt the brush of his lips like a brand. She caught Celeste watching them from across the room, her beautiful face twisted with an emotion that looked suspiciously like envy. Mission accomplished, Victoria thought. But the victory felt hollow as the evening wound down. Nathan led Victoria out onto the hotel's terrace. The city spread out below them, a glittering tapestry of lights and shadows. The cool night air was a relief after the heat of the ballroom. Thank you, Nathan said quietly. We're magnificent tonight. Just doing my job, Victoria replied. But even she could hear how breathless she sounded. Nathan stepped closer, backing her against the stone balustrade. Was it just a job? Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. Nathan was so close, she could see the flecks of gold in his blue eyes, could feel the heat radiating from his body. This was dangerous territory, far beyond the bounds of their agreement. Nathan, she whispered. But she couldn't seem to form any other words. He reached up to cup her face, his thumb tracing her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. Tell me this. Is all pretend, Victoria. Tell me you feel nothing, and I'll take you home right now. Victoria knew she should lie, should stick to their agreement, take her money, and walk away before she got hurt. But when she looked into Nathan's eyes, she saw the same confusion and desire that was tearing her apart. Instead of answering, she rose on her toes and kissed him. The kiss was electric, desperate, full of all the tension that had been building between them since the moment they met. Nathan's arms came around her, pulling her against him as if he could absorb her into his very soul. Victoria melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she lost herself in the taste and heat of him. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Nathan rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. This complicates things, he said roughly. Yes, Victoria agreed. It does. From inside the ballroom came the sound of applause as the evening officially ended. Soon, guests would begin to leave, and their perfect performance would be over. But as Victoria looked into Nathan's eyes, she realized the real performance was just beginning. The ride back to Victoria's apartment was charged with electricity. They sat on opposite sides of the car's spacious interior, but the distance felt meaningless. Every breath, every glance, every casual movement seemed magnified in the intimate space. Nathan's phone buzzed constantly with messages and calls, but he ignored them all. His attention was focused entirely on Victoria, who was staring out the window at the passing city lights. Regrets? He asked finally. Victoria turned to look at him, her green eyes unreadable in the dim light. About which part? Any of it? All of it. Nathan's voice was rougher than usual. That kiss changed everything. Did it? Victoria's smile was mysterious. Or did it just reveal what was already there? Before Nathan could respond, his phone rang again.
Yes.
This time, he glanced at the screen and cursed under his breath. Harrison Blake, he said, showing Victoria the caller ID. Probably calling to gloat about something. Answer it, Victoria said. I'm curious what he has to say. Nathan accepted the call and put it on speaker. Harrison's voice filled the car, smooth and confident. Nathan, old friend. Quite a performance tonight. Thank you. Nathan replied coolly. Victoria and I certainly enjoyed ourselves. I'm sure you did. Tell me, does she know about your little investigation into her background? About her father's connection to my company? Victoria's blood turned to ice. Nathan's face went white as he met her shocked gaze. What are you talking about, Harrison? Harrison's laugh was cold. Come now, Nathan. Did you really think I wouldn't do my own research after tonight? Victoria Sterling, formerly Victoria Ashworth, daughter of Michael Ashworth, who embezzled $3 million from Blake Industries before fleeing the country. Quite the coincidence that you'd choose her as your date, don't you think? The car filled with deadly silence. Victoria felt like she couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her father's scandal had involved Blake Industries. Nathan had known. He'd known all along. You bastard, Nathan said quietly. But Harrison had already hung up. Victoria stared at Nathan, her heart breaking into 1,000 pieces. You knew. You knew about my father and Harrison's company? Victoria, let me explain. Stop the car, Victoria said, her voice deadly calm. Victoria, please, stop the damn car. The driver pulled over immediately. Victoria was out of the vehicle before. It had fully stopped, her emerald gown billowing around her as she walked rapidly down the sidewalk. Nathan caught up with her within seconds, his hand closing around her arm. Let me explain, he pleaded. Victoria spun to face him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Explain what? That this whole thing was some elaborate scheme for revenge against Harrison Blake. That you chose me because of my father's crimes? No, that's not. Nathan ran his hands through his hair, destroying his perfect styling. Yes, I knew about your father. But that's not why I chose you. Then why? Victoria's voice cracked. Why me, Nathan? Of all the women in this city, why did you choose the daughter of a man who stole from your enemy? Nathan looked at her. For a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I was there. Victoria's breath caught. What? 15 years ago, I was a junior analyst at Blake Industries. I was working late one night when I saw your father in the office, copying files. I could have reported him immediately, but I didn't. The world seemed to tilt around Victoria. You saw him steal? I saw him copying evidence, Nathan corrected. Evidence of Harrison Blake's illegal trading practices. Your father wasn't embezzling money, Victoria. He was trying to expose Harrison's crimes. Victoria felt like she might collapse. That's impossible, my father confessed. He pleaded guilty, because Harrison threatened to destroy your entire family if he didn't. Your father took the fall to protect you and your mother. Nathan stepped closer, his eyes intense. I've spent 15 years building my company, gaining power, waiting for the right moment to bring Harrison down. When I saw you in that gallery, I thought fate had finally given me the perfect weapon. A weapon, Victoria repeated numbly. But then I got to know you, Nathan continued urgently. I saw your strength, your integrity, your passion. You became so much more than a tool for revenge. You became everything I didn't know I was looking for. Victoria shook her head, overwhelmed by the revelations. My father was innocent? He was a hero, Nathan said quietly. He sacrificed everything to try to stop a criminal. And Harrison Blake has been laughing about it for 15 years. The pieces of Victoria's shattered world began to rearrange themselves into a new, terrifying picture. Her father hadn't been a criminal. He'd been trying to do the right thing, and it had destroyed their family. Why didn't you tell me? She whispered. Because I was a coward, Nathan admitted. I was afraid you'd hate me for not speaking up sooner. For letting your father take the blame while I built my empire? Victoria looked at Nathan, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the cold, controlled CEO, but a man carrying 15 years of guilt and regret. What happens now? She asked. Nathan reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. I've been gathering evidence against Harrison for years. His financial records, witness statements, everything needed to prove your father's innocence and Harrison's guilt. I was going to wait until I had more power, more influence. But after tonight, after that kiss, he held out the drive. I'm done waiting. Victoria stared at the small device that could change everything. If we do this, Harrison will fight back. He'll try to destroy us both. Probably, Nathan agreed. Are you willing to take that risk? Victoria thought about her father, broken and defeated, dying in exile while his family believed he was a criminal. She thought about Harrison Blake, living in luxury built on lies and stolen money. About Nathan, carrying the weight of his silence for 15 years. Yes, she said firmly. But we do this together. No more secrets. No more lies. Nathan's face transformed with relief and something deeper. Together, he agreed. As if summoned by their decision, Nathan's phone buzzed with a text message. Harrison. Blake's name appeared on the screen with a simple message. Meet me at my office. 1 hour. Come alone, or the evidence against Victoria's gallery for money laundering goes public. Victoria read the message over Nathan's shoulder. He's bluffing, is he? Nathan's expression was grim. Harrison Blake doesn't make idle threats. Then we call his bluff, Victoria said, surprised by her own courage. But we do it on our terms. An hour later, they stood outside Blake Industries' gleaming headquarters. Victoria had changed into a simple black dress and pulled her hair back in a severe bun. She looked like a woman ready for war. Nathan pressed the flash drive into her hand. If anything goes wrong, nothing will go wrong, Victoria interrupted. We have the truth on our side. They rode the elevator to the penthouse floor in silence. Harrison Blake was waiting for them in his opulent office, standing behind his massive desk like a king on his throne. Celeste sat in a chair nearby, her earlier beauty now sharp and predatory. What? Harrison said smoothly, I told you to come alone. Victoria has as much stake in this as I do, Nathan replied. More, actually, Harrison's gaze fixed on Victoria. The daughter returns to the scene of the crime. How poetic. The only crime here is yours, Victoria said calmly. And we have proof. Celeste laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Proof. Of what? That your father was a thief who couldn't face the consequences of his actions? Victoria felt Nathan tense beside her, but she placed a calming hand on his arm. Actually, we have proof that Harrison Blake has been systematically defrauding investors for over 20 years. that he framed my father to cover up his own crimes, and that he's continued those crimes right up to the present day. Harrison's confident expression flickered for just a moment. You're bluffing. Victoria pulled out the flash drive. Financial records, email communications, witness statements, everything the sect needs to put you away for the rest of your life. You have nothing, Harrison snarled, but his voice lacked its earlier confidence. We have everything, Nathan said, quietly, including video evidence of you bribing the judge in Michael Ashworth's case. The color drained from Harrison's face. Celeste looked between them, confusion replacing her earlier smugness. What do you want? Harrison asked finally. Justice. Victoria replied. A full confession, public exoneration of my father's name, and your resignation from every board and company you've corrupted. And if I refuse... Nathan smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. Then we release everything to the media, the SEC, and the FBI simultaneously. Your choice. The standoff stretched for long moments. Finally, Harrison slumped in his chair, looking older than his years. You win, he said quietly. No, Victoria corrected. Truth wins. Finally. 6 months later, Victoria stood in her gallery, now expanded into the space next door. The walls displayed a new exhibition, Redemption, Art from the Ashes. Her father's story had become a symbol of integrity, triumphing over corruption, and the gallery was thriving. Nathan entered quietly, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He'd stepped down as CEO of Crosstech to focus on philanthropy in his new role as the gallery's silent partner and Victoria's very public boyfriend. The Times Review came in, he said, handing her a cup. They're calling it a masterpiece of human resilience. Victoria smiled, leaning into his embrace. Not bad for a couple of people who started out lying to each other. We're not lying. Anymore, Nathan murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. No, Victoria agreed, turning in his arms. We're finally telling the truth. As they kissed, surrounded by art that celebrated the triumph of authenticity over deception, Victoria realized that sometimes the best stories begin with the biggest lies. But they always end with the simplest truth. Love conquers all, especially when it's built on honesty, courage, and the willingness to fight for what's right. Harrison Blake was serving a 20-year sentence in federal prison. Celeste had fled to Europe, her reputation in ruins. But Victoria and Nathan had found something worth more than revenge. They'd found each other. And in doing so, had discovered that the most beautiful masterpiece of all was a life lived without masks or pretense. Their fake relationship had become the realest thing either of them had ever experienced. And that, Victoria thought, as Nathan's arms tightened around her, was the most beautiful ending of all.